Most people think financial mistakes are obvious: missing bills, overspending, or ignoring debt. Yet the most damaging errors are often invisible, quietly accumulating over years. They don't trigger alarms, don't feel urgent, and rarely appear in conversations, but they determine whether someone builds wealth or remains trapped in a cycle of mediocrity. Hello, I'm Max, and if this content helps you see money in a clearer, calmer way, I invite you to like and subscribe. Here, we explore finances not through hype or shortcuts, but through practical understanding and long-term perspective. The first hidden mistake is underestimating small, repeated expenditures. Individual purchases may seem insignificant: a coffee every morning, a streaming service or subscription, or an impulse purchase here and there. Taken alone, each seems harmless. Over time, however, they compound. Money spent habitually on convenience or comfort often exceeds what people save or invest, silently reducing their future options. The mistake is not spending occasionally, it is failing to notice the cumulative effect, and assuming small expenses are inconsequential. The second mistake is failing to account for time and opportunity costs. Most financial advice emphasizes what you spend or save, but rarely considers what your choices prevent you from doing. Working extra hours for short-term income may feel productive, yet it can reduce time for learning, building skills, or exploring investments that would generate passive income later. Similarly, keeping money in low-yield accounts seems safe but comes at the cost of missed growth. These trade-offs are subtle, often invisible, and quietly shape long-term financial outcomes. The third overlooked error is relying on surface-level metrics without understanding underlying structures. People may focus on their credit score, net worth, or monthly savings rate, believing these numbers reflect security. In reality, metrics without context can be misleading. A high net worth may coexist with high leverage or dependency on a single income source. A solid credit score may hide structural vulnerabilities, like expenses that rise automatically with income. Mistakes like this are not immediately painful, they are structural, and their impact emerges slowly, sometimes years later. Each of these mistakes is compounded by psychological biases. Humans naturally prioritize comfort and immediate gratification, often underestimating the invisible costs of seemingly small decisions. Social norms reinforce this pattern: convenience is celebrated, visible progress is rewarded, and the deeper structures that govern long-term stability remain invisible. Awareness of these silent mistakes is the first step toward improvement. Recognizing that the biggest financial threats are often quiet and cumulative allows people to rethink habits, evaluate choices more critically, and build systems that reduce hidden risk. Small adjustments in spending, attention to opportunity costs, and a deeper understanding of structural metrics can make the difference between stagnation and long-term growth. Ultimately, avoiding these invisible mistakes is less about extreme discipline or cutting all enjoyment and more about awareness, intentionality, and perspective. The mistakes exist in plain sight, but they are easy to ignore until their consequences become visible, and by then, reversing them requires much more effort. The second part of understanding these hidden financial mistakes is recognizing how subtle habits shape outcomes over time. Most people underestimate the cumulative power of seemingly small choices. While a single choice rarely causes harm, repeated decisions, often unconscious, create patterns that silently determine long-term success or stagnation. Consider the habit of paying only the minimum on debt. On the surface, meeting monthly obligations seems responsible. Yet by extending repayment periods, interest quietly accumulates. Months become years, and what appeared manageable gradually grows into a heavier burden. The mistake isn't failing to pay, it's ignoring how incremental decisions multiply over time. Many people live with this invisible pressure for years, rarely noticing its impact until financial flexibility feels restricted. Another subtle error lies in ignoring inflation and opportunity costs simultaneously. Money kept idle in accounts with low interest may feel safe, but it loses value silently. Even disciplined savers can fall behind if they do not consider the real growth potential of their funds. The harm is invisible. Balances may increase nominally, yet purchasing power diminishes. Over decades, these small differences compound into substantial gaps between perceived security and actual financial health. A third habit is automatically increasing lifestyle with income. Promotions, raises, and bonuses are often absorbed entirely by higher spending, bigger rent, more subscriptions, or more frequent purchases. While income grows, true wealth does not. This is sometimes called lifestyle creep, and it is almost invisible to the person experiencing it. Comfort rises, but financial freedom stagnates. Years of earning more can feel like progress, yet the underlying structure remains unchanged. Psychological biases amplify these patterns. Humans naturally prefer immediate satisfaction over delayed rewards. Convenience and comfort are often prioritized over strategic growth. Social pressures reinforce these habits. Friends, family, and peers normalize rising expenses, visible consumption, and cautious financial behavior. As a result, many people remain unaware that their habits are quietly eroding long-term potential. These mistakes often interact. Consider someone who consistently pays the minimum on debt, increases spending as income grows, and keeps surplus cash in low-yield accounts. Each choice individually seems harmless, yet combined, they create a system that silently prevents wealth accumulation. The cumulative effect is far greater than the sum of its parts. The key to avoiding these traps is intentional awareness. Tracking spending is not enough. One must also understand the hidden implications of decisions. Questioning assumptions, like a raise should increase comfort immediately or minimum payments are fine, allows for gradual but meaningful change. Small adjustments, applied consistently, can reverse patterns before they solidify into long-term constraints. In practice, this means creating systems that prioritize long-term benefit while accommodating human nature. Allocating surplus income to assets rather than consumption, automating savings, and planning for delayed gratification are all methods to counter invisible mistakes. Over time, these small interventions compound, gradually shifting outcomes in one's favor. Ultimately, avoiding these hidden financial errors is less about radical transformation and more about seeing clearly. The mistakes are easy to overlook because they feel normal and comfortable. Awareness alone begins to dismantle their silent power, allowing intentional actions to guide future wealth instead of unconscious habits. By now, it is clear that small, repeated choices can quietly shape long-term outcomes, but the most insidious mistakes often stem from psychology rather than arithmetic. People do what feels safe, comfortable, or socially approved, even when those decisions silently reduce their financial freedom. The problem is not awareness, it is the way humans are wired to respond to incentives, pressure, and uncertainty. One psychological trap is short-term gratification disguised as efficiency. For example, using credit cards to cover small expenses may feel convenient and harmless, yet the compound effect of interest and fees accumulates slowly. People often rationalize these choices, "It's just a small amount," or "I'll pay it off later." Over years, these repeated rationalizations quietly drain resources that could have been invested or saved. The error is not a single decision, it is the repeated pattern supported by comforting narratives. Another factor is social comparison and relative thinking. Financial decisions are rarely made in isolation. People measure themselves against peers, neighbors, or colleagues. If friends are upgrading phones annually, taking frequent vacations, or dining out regularly, the social pressure can subtly increase spending, even when it exceeds one's means. The mistake is not enjoying life, but letting visible consumption shape invisible long-term outcomes. Many never notice how slowly these habits shift the trajectory of their wealth. Risk perception also plays a role. Most advice encourages avoiding debt or building a safety net, yet many individuals treat risk inconsistently. They may aggressively avoid small losses but accept hidden structural risks, like spending raises entirely instead of saving or investing them. These decisions often feel cautious in the moment, but cumulatively, they reduce resilience. It is a psychological mismatch. People believe they are protecting themselves, yet silently undermine their options. Another subtle psychological barrier is delayed feedback. Unlike immediate losses or gains, the consequences of these invisible mistakes often appear years later. Paying minimum debt, slowly increasing lifestyle with income, or leaving money idle does not feel painful in the short term. Over time, however, these patterns compound. By the time the impact is noticeable, habits are deeply entrenched, making correction more difficult. Many people underestimate the importance of long-term feedback loops because they are not psychologically salient. Breaking free from these patterns requires intentional awareness and system design. Rather than relying on motivation alone, people benefit from structures that guide choices automatically. Automating savings, setting rules for discretionary spending, and reviewing decisions periodically helps counter psychological bias. This reduces friction and prevents repeated mistakes from accumulating unnoticed. Small interventions, consistently applied, yield disproportionate long-term benefits. Consider someone who directs a portion of every paycheck to investment accounts before considering discretionary spending, automates debt repayment above minimums, and consciously resists lifestyle creep. None of these choices are dramatic, and none feel like deprivation in the short term. Yet, over years, the compound effect creates financial resilience and flexibility that is invisible to outsiders until the outcomes are unmistakable. Ultimately, most people fail to escape these silent mistakes because they underestimate their invisible impact and psychological drivers. Awareness alone is not enough. Systems, habits, and frameworks are necessary to align human behavior with long-term financial goals. Once these are in place, decisions that once seemed trivial begin to produce meaningful leverage. Financial freedom is rarely a result of luck or extreme talent. It is the product of small, consistent choices, shaped by awareness and guided by systems that account for human nature. The mistakes are easy to overlook precisely because they feel normal, rational, and comfortable, but when addressed intentionally, they lose their quiet power. At this stage, it becomes clear that awareness alone is not enough. Knowing about small, repeated mistakes, psychological traps, and hidden costs does little if systems are not designed to counter them. The next step is building a personal framework that transforms awareness into action, ensuring small mistakes do not accumulate silently over time. A personal financial system begins with structure, not motivation. Motivation fluctuates, energy ebbs and flows, distractions are constant. Relying solely on willpower to make the right decision every day is unrealistic. Instead, systems create automatic pathways for better decisions. For example, automatically directing a portion of income to investment accounts before spending ensures consistent progress. Setting up automated debt repayments above minimums reduces interest accumulation without relying on monthly discipline. These mechanisms allow good choices to happen even when attention wanes. Flexibility is another essential feature. Life is unpredictable, emergencies arise, priorities shift, and opportunities appear unexpectedly. Systems that are too rigid collapse under these pressures. By contrast, a flexible framework can absorb shocks without derailing long-term goals. For instance, maintaining a buffer for unexpected expenses while continuing to invest steadily creates resilience. Small adjustments can be made without abandoning the system, keeping progress continuous rather than interrupted. Another key element is intentional evaluation of habits. Many mistakes go unnoticed because habits are unconscious. Morning coffee, subscription services, impulse purchases, all seem trivial, yet compound over time. A robust system involves regular reflection, reviewing spending, tracking progress, and identifying patterns. This does not mean obsessing over every minor decision. It means noticing recurring behaviors that silently influence long-term outcomes. The role of psychology remains central. Humans are wired for short-term gratification, social comparison, and cognitive biases. A good system accounts for this. It separates decisions from emotion wherever possible. For example, creating separate accounts for needs, wants, and investments reduces the mental friction associated with spending choices. Establishing rules for discretionary spending prevents small impulses from silently undermining long-term goals. Over time, these adjustments create consistency without constant effort. Another principle is compounding small advantages. Invisible mistakes often accumulate slowly, but so do small improvements. Each small adjustment, avoiding unnecessary fees, redirecting income to high-impact areas, or slightly increasing investment contributions, compounds over years. The difference between a haphazard approach and a systematic one is enormous, though largely invisible in the early stages. This is why many who follow advice without a framework fail, while those with systems quietly succeed. Finally, independence from external validation is critical. Most financial advice encourages conformity. Save, spend less, avoid debt. While these are broadly useful, blindly following rules without adapting to personal circumstances can create friction or frustration. A well-designed system allows decisions to align with reality, not social expectation. Comfort and confidence replace anxiety, making long-term adherence sustainable. By integrating structure, flexibility, reflection, and psychological insight, invisible mistakes lose their power. Small, repeated errors no longer accumulate unnoticed, and habits begin to work in favor rather than against long-term goals. Over years, what once felt random or uncontrollable becomes predictable and manageable. The individual gradually gains freedom, resilience, and clarity. The quiet truth is that financial mistakes are rarely catastrophic. They are cumulative. Addressing them does not require dramatic change, just awareness, intentional systems, and consistent small actions. Those who build such frameworks move from reactive financial survival to proactive wealth creation, quietly reshaping their future while others remain unaware of the hidden forces shaping their lives.